Okay, so good day everyone. For today, I am going to discuss the life of William Labov and his theory in social linguistics called LVC or language variation change. Okay, so to start off, let's go first. Let's have a glimpse of the life of William Labov. Okay, William Labov is regarded as the father of modern social linguistics. That's according to Spolsky in 2010. But he refers the label variation and change for the type of linguistics he practices. Okay, so his theory about LVC or language variation and change made him famous in the world of social linguistics. So according to him, social linguistics is a large and uniform area with many different ways of approaching the subject that aren't necessarily linguistics, whereas the study of variation and change describes pretty well the enterprise we're engaged in. So we all know in studying linguistics, one of the principles of language is that language changes. So this is the theory of William Labov. How language varies and changes. How language varies from one place to another and how language changes in a period of time. So the foundational maxim of LVC principle, when we speak of LVC, it is language variation change. So according to Weinreich, Labov, and Herzog in 1968, the key to a rational conception of language change, the key to irrational conception of language change is is the possibility of describing orderly differentiation. Variation is an inherent part of language. That's why it's natural. The fact that there is language, there is a variation. That's according to Labov. Now, what inspires Labov to study variation and change? So he has two roadblocks, okay? But before that, the linguistic behavior of individuals cannot be understood without knowledge of the communities that they belong to. Now, what are these roadblocks? First one is the synchronic linguistics. When we speak of synchronic linguistics, this is a type of change that is studied by social linguists. It is a change of language in social status. Okay, synchronic linguistics held that a speaker's idiolect, which includes the grammar of an individual, was sufficient to account for qualities of language. And number two, since the methodology of the time went to no further than study of a few idiolects, diachronic linguistics was not able to account for how people use language if it was continually changing. Now, there are four linguistics assumptions that Labov found it problematic, but these problems were answered by his argument. So the first assumption is synchronic language must be studied separately from diachronic system. So that's the first assumption. The synchronic language is should be separated from the diachronic system. While according to Lebov, the two, which is the synchronic language and the diachronic system, are inseparable. That's why it should be studied together. Next, sound change cannot be directly observed. That's according to Bloomfield in 1933. So Bloomfield supposed that irregular linguistic process such as borrowing would always disrupt in the synchronic view any possible observation of sound change. Well, according to Labov, removing the empirical study of linguistic change from the program of the 20th century linguistics. He found the explanatory power of empirical synchronic observations in the correlations between social structures and linguistic structures. Next one, feelings about language are inaccessible. In fact, according to Bloch and Traeger, in 1942, the speaker's feelings about sound should be off limits to linguists because that is not what linguists do due to lack of methodology in assessing them. Well, according to Labov, such purism gets in the way of one's view of language as it is spoken. Last one, the use of non-linguistic data to explain linguistic change is prohibited. That is the fourth assumption. Well, according to Labov, the role of language in self-identification is important for phonological change. Let's move forward to the principles of Labov in linguistic change. So this is his view on how language change. So principle one, he called it as change from below. So according to him, linguistic change from below originates in a central social group located in the interior of the socioeconomic hierarchy. The so-called interior social classes, such as the lower middle and upper middle class, lead linguistic change. They have higher frequency of incoming forms. So according to him, it is not the rich that starts language change. It is not actually poor. It is only the lower middle and the upper middle class. In our generation today, we can see that it is not the business people who are the frontliners in changing the language, but it is the millennials, specifically the social media users. So somehow, I believe that it is true. His first principle is true. Next one, stability. For stable social linguistic variables, women shows lower rate of stigmatized variants and higher rate of prestige variants than men. Principle 2 strongly implicates uh-huh, women's social role in speech community. So that's the second principle of Labov. Okay. Now, before we move forward, let's first differentiate the stigma and prestige because according to that principle, um, women showed lower rate of stigmatized variants and higher than prestige. When we speak of stigma, this is the language of uneducated or the lower class. So when we speak of prestige, it is the language used by educated or sophisticated individuals. So according to that, women shows lower rate in the uneducated or lower class language and higher rate in the prestige or or the educated ones. Okay, it implicates the role of women in the speech community. Next one. Third principle is change from above. Women adopt diffusing forms at a higher rate than men. Principle 3 suggests that one of the identifying features of change from above would be the greater use of women of diffusing forms and a greater use by men of local or dialectal variants. So men are typically using the dialects while women are using the others language. Next, change from below. Women use higher frequencies of innovative forms than men do. It suggests that an identifying feature of change from below would be a greater use by women of innovative forms. To conclude, the study of LVC requires reference to external conditions and internal conditions to explain variation. The level of grammar of a feature is important, and so are its geographic origin and social evaluation. And these different facets all contribute to understanding the whole. A grammatical pattern may be the key to determining where a linguistic feature came from. A feature's history in a community may explain its social value. The type of social correlates as a variant and has may reveal its evolution. The development of a linguistic feature reflects on social and economic change. So it is indeed language is changing. And we have different factors of it, such as the social and the economic factors. And as time goes by, language is changing. Another conclusion, Labov works have inspired and influenced many LVC scholars of today. His legacy has produced productive and innovative language scholars. The exacting empirical description of the speech community's linguistic system is the main point in doing the LVC studies. The variables were only means to that end. So, language, to conclude it all, language changes based on different factors such as the socioeconomic status, okay, and socioeconomic and social status. So with that, this is my reference. Thank you and God bless.